Let me ask you, what do you think of when you think of a cowboy? A man riding his horse and lassoing an would-be bandit? Is John Wayne standing off against an outlaw? A sharpshooter who would never miss his target? Chances are, that's what you think. And like many things in the Old West, it's mostly a romanticized myth made up through folklore and Hollywood movies. Even if you know that the movies don't reflect reality, these myths have been so ingrained in our society that it's hard to tell the difference between the movies and historical facts. Hollywood tends to hide the truth, but we are going to debunk here what really happened in the Old West with these guys. So forget what you know about the cowboy. We're going to look at the real story that Hollywood hides, along with some crazy information about the cowboys that might not be as easy to stomach. But before we get into it, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications to be the fastest people in the West to see our latest videos. No, cowboys were not all white. When we picture a cowboy, we picture a man who's white. You probably think this because most cowboy characters in media are white men. But besides that, you probably associate the Old West with slavery or major discrimination. However, many cowboys were Black, Latino, Native American, and other races. In fact, many cowboys were Black. Guess how many? 5%? You're way off the mark, partner. 10? Not even close. As many as 25% of cowboys were Black. Black cowboys were just as tough as their white counterparts, if not tougher. One cowboy, Nat Love, came from slavery and, according to legend, earned the name Deadwood Dick after excelling in all of the rodeo contests. The 2021 movie, The Harder They Fall, was based on Nat's legend. Obviously, this movie takes creative liberties with him, but it's good to see more movies representing Black cowboys. Other notable Black cowboys include Bose Icard, a man who was a part of the pioneering of cattle drives on the Goodnight Loving Trail throughout the Civil War. Icard ended up inspiring fictional cowboys who were also Black, including Joshua Dietz, a character in Lonesome Dove, written by Larry McMurtry, and Bill Pickett, who was inducted into the National Rodeo Hall of Fame in 1972. Though this cowboy was fictional, he was inspired by many of the African-American cowboys of the past. So no, while Hollywood does portray a lot of cowboys as white men, it was not always a white man's job. Not every cowboy was good with a gun. You may picture a cowboy as being the fastest shot in the West, able to shoot a target from 50 feet away on his first try. But in truth, cowboys were just that, men who dealt with herding cattle. Most cowboys did not even carry a gun, as they were poor and getting a gun was expensive at the time. If they did have a gun, they were often not the best shot with them, and they only used it as a last resort to defend themselves. After all, cowboys were too busy herding cattle to practice shooting. That being said, this myth may originate from cow towns like Dodge City. After a long day's work, some show-offy cowboys may have tried some gunplay at the bar, but often it did not turn out too well. While Hollywood loves to show these men shooting guns almost perfectly, know that many actual cowboys were more keen to bring out guns in order to protect their herds. Cowboys were not just lonesome guys. When you think of a cowboy, you picture a lone man coming into town with nothing but his horse and his wits. And once his business is done, he rides into the sunset while the townsfolk marvel at this lone man's accomplishments. In truth, cowboys needed a team to herd cattle, especially during long cattle drives that could last months. At least 10 cowboys would do the herding, using 3 horses per cowboy. Cowboys worked in groups when on drives, taking shifts to protect the cattle and ensure they weren't stolen. It is amazing to think about, since one might wonder how they managed to wrangle all those cattle. But they did. So yes, there was strength in numbers. Hollywood does like to show some cowboys working together though, so it is not just one man's job. To illustrate this point further, even the Lone Ranger had Tonto to help him. Cowboys and Native Americans were not mortal enemies. When you think of the foil for cowboys, you may think of an indigenous tribe charging at a cowboy riding his horse. Cowboys and Indians was a game that kids played for years, and yet in reality, cowboys and the Native Americans rarely fought. If you were a cowboy, you were more likely to die from falling off your horse than a spear to the gut. While soldiers got into battles with Native Americans, even their battles weren't as common as the movies would like you to believe. In fact, some artists and historians have discovered that cowboys and Native Americans were far friendlier than expected, as the evolution of the cowboy was heavily influenced by Native American culture. But no, there was not a constant war between cowboys and Native Americans. Most Native Americans had no use for cattle, with these animals being too big and with most tribes being lactose intolerant. And when a cowboy did meet a Native American, many reactions weren't of scorn, but of sympathy. One anonymous cowboy who encountered Native Americans had this to say about them. The people we saw scattered about in small villages or begging beef from us were not the savage foes of Western lore, but a sorry lot of starving human beings. Cowboys were not always wearing hats. So many things about cowboys weren't true, but those 10-gallon cowboy hats, they have to be true, right? Wrong. During the time of the cowboy, many wore hats, but they were usually derby hats. For example, here's a photo of the Wild Bunch. Now, does this look like the cowboy hat you're familiar with? Other favorite hats include the sombrero, a wool cap, and a Civil War cap. Some of these, such as the sombrero, might be traced back to the vaquero and caballero. Vaqueros were traditional workers of Spanish tradition, whereas the caballero was the ranch owner who employed these riders. So where did the modern-day cowboy hat come from? Once again, we have to thank the movies for this one. Movie stars like Tom Mix and Tim McCoy popularized these hats. These larger-than-life hats looked cool in film, but like superhero capes, they're impractical in real life. These hats would have made a cowboy noticeable when they were trying to avoid people, and despite their name, a 10-gallon hat does not hold 10 gallons of water. So yeah, Hollywood did get the guys wrong as well. Cowboys were not all free men. As you know by now, cowboys could be black, but they were all free men, right? Not quite. In fact, some of the earliest cowboys may have been black slaves. There were 400-year-old cow bones found on the island of Hispaniola, and this revealed that these cows were African in origin, and this would have been around the time of the slave trade. To show that the cowboy was more rooted in black culture than you may believe, the term cowboy in general may have had its start as a derogatory term. White cowboys were often called cowhands, and cowboys was a term used for black cowhands, as boy was commonly used as a term to infantilize them. Even for white cowboys, they weren't exactly free either. They worked for wealthy ranchers, but just like a person working for a billion-dollar corporation today, the payment was rarely good. Some of them worked for up to 20 hours a day. Could you imagine working for 20 hours, sleeping for 4 hours, then doing the whole thing again? Their payment could be between $25 to $40 a month, which could equal about $1,000 today. Being a cowboy was not an easy job, but it was also not a very high-paying job either. Cowboys were not just partying. Another common belief was that cowboys liked to party. We probably think about this myth because of two things. First, the movies, where you may see a group of cowboys having a good time at the saloon. Second, we may think of Nashville, a city where people get drunk at honky-tonk bars while wearing designer cowboy hats. But the truth is far less exciting. We mentioned earlier that some cowboys did like to go to bars, get drunk, and sometimes cause a little chaos. But that didn't happen that much. Many cowboys were hard laborers who didn't have much money. When the day was done, the last thing they wanted to do was to party until the brink of dawn. Many of them in the Old West worked long hours. And after you herd a bunch of cattle, most of the time, these guys wanted to sleep rather than go out and cause a bunch of ruckus. Drinking did happen, but it wasn't frequent. When cowboys did drink, it was obviously for pleasure and to unwind, but whiskey was touted as a miracle cure. In these times, whiskey was thought to cure many ailments, including loneliness. Well, this is true in a way. Instead, many cowboys got down while on the trail. Some held stag dances, while others would sing songs about how trail life was horrible. They may have even cracked a raunchy joke or two. Most of these guys would save singing songs and letting loose for the campfires, which they had some nights while out on the road. Not every cowboy carried. Many cowboys did not use guns, but you may think that those who did were always strapped, even when they went into town. You may think of a cowboy in a saloon with a revolver in his holster, sipping some whiskey and ready to fight. However, guns were not allowed in many cities, such as Tombstone or Dodge City. When you visited these towns, you had to turn your gun in at a police station or other accepted location, and then you could take it when you had to leave. And if you think that cowboys were folk who would not stand for this law, most complied. As we've said, Many were poor folk who did not want to cause any trouble. It also made it easy for law and order to happen in these towns for the most part. Cowboys only used revolvers and pistols. The revolver has become synonymous with the cowboy, but it's also mythologized thanks to movies, dime novels, and traveling Old West novelty shows. One reason for this is that revolvers just look flashy and cool. Think about it. Wouldn't you like to run around just twirling a pistol like that? However, many cowboys were often untrained, and when danger occurred, they needed something accurate and easy to shoot. Therefore, rifles were often the weapons of choice for cowboys, such as the Winchester. If a cowboy did use a revolver or pistol, it was merely as a backup, and it tended to be a Colt. Other tools that cowboys carried on them that could be used as weapons include knives, lassos, and also lariats. Again, these were used for daily tasks involving cattle. In some instances, these cowboys may also carry simple farming tools as well. Cowboys are not just an American thing. Finally, we have this myth. Cowboys have become synonymous with America as a whole. When depicting Americans, many foreign media associate Americans with cowboys. But just like America itself, cowboys were influenced by other cultures. The cowboy aesthetic was influenced by Mexican vaqueros, who were around for centuries before the founding of America. In fact, it can be traced from its roots to the modern-day cowboy. Vaqueros have a pretty extensive history that goes way back. They were first trained all the way back in the 1500s by the Spaniards. Many of them were Mesoamerican men trained to wrangle cattle. Sound familiar? Again, it is because a lot of the original inspiration for cowboys comes from these guys. Many of them eventually expanded to North America, including the Southwest regions, by the 1700s. You can see how, over time, these guys became a big influence on American cowboys. Here's a painting of a vaquero made in the 1830s. And as you can see, it has many things we associate with a cowboy, from the rope to the jacket. The modern cowboy myth is taken from the vaqueros and also from many movies, books, and folklore. While some media tries to be more inclusive and historically accurate, almost all of it adds creative liberties in one way or another. For some, this may be disappointing. Many of us wish we were born in the past, as it seems more exciting and less restrictive. But instead, we're looking at history as romanticized and whitewashed by the movies and misconceptions. For many in the frontier, life was grueling, with cowboys spending most of their day driving cattle and having little time to enjoy life itself. Most did not fight Indians or knew how to shoot targets from afar. But there are many things about cowboys that are outright inspiring. For example, they all worked together, and despite discrimination, even Black and Indigenous folk got to be cowboys. And while they weren't gunslingers, they were tough and had true grit. It takes no ordinary man to travel across a rough and often dangerous terrain with cattle that could get lost, eaten, or stolen. Very few of us could work for up to over 20 hours a day with a pay that is measly even by today's standards. These men helped form the great nation today as we know it, and their influence is still seen today. This isn't to say you can't enjoy a good cowboy movie or story. We love a good Western film as much as the next person. But remember, it's fiction, and even those based on real stories have had the truth stretched to fit Hollywood. That said, we believe that most of our viewers know that many aspects of the Old West were romanticized, but there are still myths you may have believed. So did you believe any of these myths? Are there any myths you knew were false? Any other myths or misconceptions you want us to cover in the future? Leave a comment below, subscribe, and hit that bell to see what parts of the frontier we'll tackle next.